How can a simple request for space turn into a public legal showdown? What started as me seeking time to heal ended with a stranger handing me divorce papers in front of my own family. Can I still blame my husband for what happened, or did I write the ending myself? The cramped living room of our apartment felt even smaller as I stood there, watching Ethan grade papers at the kitchen table. His red pen moved methodically across each assignment, the same way he approached everything in our marriage. Predictable, boring, safe. 7 years of this routine had drained every ounce of romance from my soul. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said, my voice carefully measured to convey the seriousness of the moment. He looked up, his brown eyes tired behind wire-rimmed glasses. "What's wrong, Lysandra?" I had rehearsed this conversation in my head dozens of times, perfecting each word to sound reasonable and justified. "I need some space, time to heal and figure things out." "Heal from what?" His pen stopped moving. "I don't understand." This was exactly the response I expected. Confusion instead of concern, questions instead of understanding. It proved my point perfectly. "From us, Ethan. From this." I gestured around the apartment, at the stack of bills on the counter, at his grading papers, at the mundane life we'd built together. "I feel suffocated. I need time to breathe, to remember who I am outside of this marriage." Ethan set down his pen completely now, giving me his full attention. "Lysandra, if something's bothering you, we can work through it together. We always have." "That's the problem," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's always about working through things, about being practical and responsible. When was the last time you did something spontaneous? When did you last surprise me or make me feel special?" I could see the hurt flash across his face, but I pressed on. This was important. My happiness was at stake. "I've been thinking about this for months, Ethan. I feel like I'm disappearing in this relationship. You come home, grade papers, we watch TV, go to bed, and repeat. I'm 33 years old, and I feel like my life is already over. So what exactly are you asking for?" His voice had grown quieter, more careful. "A separation. Just temporary," I added quickly. "Maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. I need to stay somewhere else, clear my head, figure out what I want." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. "Where would you go?" "I could stay with Greta for a while. She has that spare room." "And what about Mia?" Our 7-year-old daughter was at her friend's house for a sleepover, blissfully unaware that her parents' marriage was crumbling. "We'll figure out a schedule. She doesn't need to know all the details right now." "Lysandra, I don't understand where this is coming from. I thought we were happy. "That's exactly the problem," I interrupted. "You thought we were happy because you're content with mediocrity. You never asked if I was happy. You just assumed." I could see him processing this, trying to find the right words. That was another thing about Ethan. He always had to think everything through before responding. Where was the passion, the immediate emotional reaction? "If you need some time, then okay. But I think we should try counseling first. Maybe we can." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. "I don't want to sit in some therapist's office and pretend this is fixable with communication exercises," I said. "I need real space, Ethan. Physical distance." He nodded slowly, defeat written across his features. "How long?" "I don't know. Until I figure things out." After he agreed, I called my sister Greta. She lived 20 minutes away in a nicer neighborhood, in a house she'd bought after her divorce 3 years ago. "Of course you can stay here," Greta said when I explained the situation. "I always thought Ethan was a little too controlling anyway. Remember how he used to check your phone?" That had happened twice, both times when I'd been texting male coworkers late at night about work projects. But Greta was right. It showed a lack of trust that had always bothered me. "He just doesn't understand me," I told her. He thinks providing a stable home is enough, but I need more than that. I need to feel alive. You deserve to be happy, Lysandra. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for wanting more out of life. The next morning, I packed a suitcase while Ethan made breakfast for Mia. I could hear them talking in the kitchen, his voice gentle as he explained that Mommy was going to stay with Aunt Greta for a little while. Why? Mia asked. Sometimes grown-ups need time to think about important things, Ethan said. Is Mommy mad at us? No, sweetheart, Mommy loves you very much. This isn't about you. I felt a pang of guilt listening to this conversation, but I pushed it away. This was about my happiness, my future. Mia would understand when she was older. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, Ethan came outside. Lysandra, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, he said quietly. I wanted to say something meaningful, something that would help him understand, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded and got in the car. As I drove away, I pulled out my phone at the first red light and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't texted in over a year, Michael Thompson. We'd gone to college together, and he'd reached out on social media a few months ago. His messages had been friendly, maybe a little flirtatious, but I'd kept things appropriate because I was married. Now, things were different. Hey, Michael, I typed. I'm finally taking that break I mentioned. Would love to catch up over coffee this weekend. The downtown cafe was busier than I'd expected for a Saturday afternoon. I'd chosen it specifically because it was far from our neighborhood, somewhere I wouldn't run into anyone Ethan and I knew. I spotted Michael immediately. He'd barely changed since college, still tall and athletic, with that easy smile that had caught my attention in our literature class 15 years ago. Lysandra, he stood up as I approached, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a moment longer than friendly. You look amazing. Thank you, I said, settling into the chair across from him. It's so good to see you. We ordered coffee and fell into easy conversation. Michael had done well for himself. He was working as a marketing director for a tech company, had traveled extensively, and seemed to be living exactly the kind of exciting life I'd always imagined for myself. So, tell me about this break you mentioned, he said, leaning forward with genuine interest. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in years. My marriage has become so stagnant, Michael. Ethan is a good man, but he's just so predictable. We've fallen into this routine where every day is exactly like the last. I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my life. That sounds suffocating, he said, his eyes full of sympathy. You were always so vibrant in college. I remember how you'd light up when we talked about traveling, about all the places you wanted to see and things you wanted to experience. Exactly. Ethan doesn't understand that. He thinks happiness means having a steady job and paying the bills on time. There's no romance, no spontaneity. Michael reached across the table and touched my hand. You deserve so much more than that, Lysandra. My phone buzzed with a call from Ethan. I glanced at it and declined the call. Everything okay? Michael asked. It's just my husband. He's probably checking up on me. I turned the phone face down. See what I mean about controlling? We talked for 2 more hours, and I felt more alive than I had in months. Michael told me about his recent trip to Italy, about the art galleries and wine tastings and midnight walks through ancient cities. It was everything I'd dreamed of doing but had given up when I settled down with Ethan. We should do this again soon, Michael said as we prepared to leave. I'd love that, I replied, meaning it completely. That evening at Greta's house, I felt lighter than I had in years. My sister was cooking dinner when I walked in, practically glowing. You look happy, she observed. The break is already doing you good. I had coffee with an old friend today. It reminded me of who I used to be before I became just Ethan's wife. What old friend? Michael Thompson. We went to college together. He reached out a few months ago, and I finally had a chance to catch up with him. Greta raised an eyebrow. Is he single? I think so, but it's not like that, Greta. We're just friends. It was nice to have an adult conversation with someone who actually listens to me. I'm not judging. I just think it's interesting that the first thing you did when you got space from Ethan was meet up with another man. It's not the first thing I did, I protested, though technically it was. And like I said, we're just friends. That night, I called to say goodnight to Mia. Ethan answered the phone. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Fine, relaxing. I'm starting to feel more like myself already." "Good. I'm glad." There was a pause. "Mia wants to talk to you." My daughter's voice was small when she came on the line. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'll see you very soon, okay?" "Daddy made pancakes for dinner because you weren't here to cook." I felt another pang of guilt, but pushed it away. "That sounds fun. I love you, Mia." "Love you too, Mommy." After I hung up, my phone chimed with a text message from Michael. "I can't stop thinking about our conversation today. You're even more incredible than I remembered. Sweet dreams." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for listening. It meant more than you know." His reply came immediately. "Any time. You deserve to be heard, Lysandra. You deserve to be cherished." I fell asleep that night feeling more appreciated than I had in years. The next few days passed in a blur of text messages with Michael. He sent me good morning messages, asked about my day, shared funny stories from work. It was everything Ethan never did. Constant attention, genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings. When Michael suggested dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, I didn't hesitate to say yes. "You look stunning," he said when I met him at the restaurant Thursday evening. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, something more sophisticated than anything in my usual wardrobe. Over wine and an expensive meal, our conversation grew more intimate. Michael told me about his divorce 3 years ago, how his ex-wife had never understood his ambition. "She wanted me to be content with a small life," he said, "but I knew I was capable of more. Sometimes you have to choose between staying safe and staying true to yourself." "That's exactly how I feel," I said, the wine making me more honest than usual. "Ethan is safe, but I'm not sure safe is enough anymore. Life is short, Lysandra. We deserve to be with people who inspire us to be our best selves." When he walked me to my car, he kissed me softly. It was gentle and sweet, and I didn't pull away. "I've wanted to do that since college," he whispered. I drove back to Greta's in a daze, my lips still tingling from the kiss. I felt guilty, but I also felt more alive than I had in years. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Michael's words echoing in my mind. Maybe Greta was right. Maybe I did deserve to be happy. Maybe this separation was exactly what I needed to figure out what I really wanted from life. My phone buzzed with another message from Michael. "Tonight was perfect. I hope this is just the beginning." I typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, "Me too." As I drifted off to sleep, I pushed away thoughts of Ethan, grading papers alone at our kitchen table, and Mia asking when Mommy was coming home. This was about my happiness, my future. Everything else would work itself out. Monday morning at the office felt different. I worked as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm, and my co-workers had always been friendly but professional. Now, sitting at my desk, I felt like I was glowing with a secret that made everything more interesting. "You look fantastic, Lysandra," said Jennifer, the receptionist, as she dropped off some files. "Did you do something different with your hair?" "Just trying some new things," I replied with a smile. "Sometimes change is good." "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You seem so much happier lately." I was happier. The past week had been like waking up from a long, boring dream. Michael and I had been texting constantly, and we'd made plans for another dinner date that weekend. During my lunch break, I found myself sharing details with my coworker, Sarah. "So you're separated from your husband and already dating someone else?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not dating exactly. We're just reconnecting as friends," I said, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. And the separation was my idea. I needed space to figure out what I really want. And what do you really want? I want to feel alive again. I want someone who appreciates me, who makes me feel special. Ethan is a good father, but he's never made me feel the way Michael does. Just be careful, Sarah warned. Office gossip travels fast, and you don't want this getting back to your husband before you're ready. I brushed off her concern. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was a separated woman exploring her options. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hi," I said, stepping away from my desk for privacy. "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I ran into Tom Morrison at the grocery store. He mentioned seeing you at Bella Vista last week with some guy." My stomach dropped. Tom was a teacher at Ethan's school, and Bella Vista was the upscale restaurant where Michael and I had dinner. "I was having dinner with an old friend," I said carefully. "I told you I needed space to figure things out." "An old friend who kisses you in parking lots." So Tom had seen that too. "Ethan, we're separated. I'm not doing anything wrong." "We're taking a break, Lysandra. We never discussed seeing other people." "We never discussed not seeing other people either," I shot back. "This is exactly why I needed space. You're being paranoid and controlling." "I'm being paranoid." His voice was rising now. "My wife is having dinner dates with other men while telling our daughter that Mommy just needs time to think." "Don't turn this around on me," I said, my own voice getting louder. "If you had been a better husband, if you had made me feel valued and appreciated, maybe I wouldn't need to find that elsewhere." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Ethan said finally, his voice cold. "So this is my fault." "I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying that our marriage has problems, and I'm trying to figure out what I want. By dating other men." "By exploring my options," I corrected, "by remembering what it feels like to be appreciated." "I always appreciated you, Lysandra." "No, you took me for granted. There's a difference." After I hung up, I felt shaken but also vindicated. Ethan's reaction proved exactly what I'd been saying. He was controlling and possessive. A truly loving husband would want me to be happy, even if that meant giving me space to explore what happiness looked like. That evening at Greta's, I vented about the conversation. "He's tracking your movements now," she said, outraged. "That's not healthy, Lysandra." "I know. It makes me think this separation was even more necessary than I realized." "What did you tell him about Michael?" "Just that he's an old friend, which is true. We did go to college together." Greta looked skeptical. "But you're interested in him as more than a friend." "I don't know yet. That's why I need this space, to figure out my feelings without Ethan breathing down my neck." The next day, Michael texted me during work. "I heard through the grapevine that your husband knows about our dinner. Are you okay?" I was surprised he'd heard about it, but I supposed news traveled fast in a city this size. "I'm fine," I texted back. "He's just being possessive. It actually confirms that I made the right decision asking for space. I don't want to cause problems for you." "You're not causing problems. You're helping me remember who I am." That weekend, Michael and I had dinner again, this time at a small Italian place across town. The conversation flowed even more easily than before, and when he suggested we go back to his apartment for wine, I said yes. We didn't sleep together, but we came close. We kissed on his couch, and I felt desired in a way I hadn't experienced in years. When I finally left around midnight, my head was spinning. I should feel guilty, I told Greta the next morning, but I don't. I feel alive. "You're separated," Greta said. "You have every right to explore your feelings." "Ethan doesn't see it that way." "Ethan wants to control you. He always has. Remember how he used to get jealous when you went out with your friends?" I did remember that, though it had only happened a few times early in our relationship. But Greta was right. There had always been signs of possessiveness. Monday morning brought more compliments from coworkers about my appearance and mood. I was dressing better, taking more care with my makeup, and it showed. You're practically glowing, Jennifer commented. Whatever you're doing, it's working. But by Tuesday, I noticed some of my co-workers whispering and glancing in my direction. When I asked Jennifer what was going on, she looked uncomfortable. It's probably nothing, she said. Just office gossip. About what? Someone mentioned seeing you around town with a guy who's not your husband. People are just talking. I felt a flush of anger. I'm separated. People need to mind their own business. I know, and I told them that, but you know how people are. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother-in-law, Ruth. Lysandra, I think we need to talk. Ruth had never been my biggest fan. She thought Ethan had married beneath him when he chose me over the doctor's daughter he'd dated before we met. What about Ruth? About what you're doing to my son and granddaughter. I'm not doing anything to them. I asked for some space to work through some issues. By running around town with other men? Do you have any idea how this looks? Ethan's colleagues are talking. People are starting to feel sorry for him. People should mind their own business, I said, echoing what I'd told Jennifer. When you're flaunting an affair around town, it becomes everyone's business. I'm not having an affair. I'm separated. You're married, Lysandra. Until you file for divorce, you're married. And married women don't go on dates with other men. After I hung up, I was furious. Everyone was ganging up on me, trying to make me feel guilty for finally putting my happiness first. Even Ethan was turning people against me, making himself look like the victim. That evening, I called Michael. I'm getting tired of everyone judging me, I told him. My mother-in-law actually called to lecture me about being seen with you. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, he said, but maybe it's a sign that you need to make a decision about what you really want. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to stop pretending this is just about space and admit that you're ready to move on from your marriage. The thought scared and thrilled me at the same time. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Take your time, he said gently, but don't let other people's judgment stop you from choosing happiness. That night, I lay awake thinking about what Michael had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was ready to admit that my marriage was over and start building a new life. The thought of telling Mia was terrifying, but children were resilient. She would adjust, especially when she saw how much happier her mother was. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of resolution settling over me. It was time to stop pretending this was temporary and start planning for my future. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a tradition, but this was the first one since my separation. I'd agreed to bring Mia and meet Ethan there, thinking it would be good for our daughter to see her parents being civil. I should have known Ruth would be there too. The moment I walked into my childhood home with Mia, I could feel the tension. My mother, Della, rushed over to hug me, while my father gave me a stiff nod. Ethan was already seated at the dining room table with Ruth beside him, both looking like they were attending a funeral. Lysandra, sweetheart, you look wonderful, my mother said loudly, shooting a pointed look at Ruth. Doesn't she look wonderful, everyone? She looks different, Ruth replied coolly. Greta arrived a few minutes later, and we all sat down to what was clearly going to be the most uncomfortable meal of my life. So, Lysandra, my father began, Ethan tells us you're staying with Greta for a while. Just until I figure some things out, I said, cutting into my roast beef. Sometimes people need space to grow. Growth is important, my mother agreed enthusiastically. Women especially need room to discover who they are outside of traditional roles. Ruth set down her fork with a sharp clink. Some people discover themselves through hobbies or education. Others apparently do it through dating other men. The table went silent except for the sound of Mia's fork against her plate. My daughter looked up, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Ruth, Ethan said quietly, not here. When then, Ethan? When is the appropriate time to discuss the fact that your wife is making a fool of you all over town? I'm not making a fool of anyone, I said, my voice rising. I'm a separated woman who's allowed to have dinner with friends. Friends? Ruth laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling it? Greta jumped in. Maybe we should change the subject. Mia doesn't need to hear this. You're right, I said, standing up. Mia, why don't you go play in the living room for a few minutes? After my daughter left the room, Ruth continued her attack. I've kept quiet for a week, but I can't stand by and watch this anymore. Do you have any idea what people are saying about Ethan at school? His colleagues feel sorry for him. His students are asking questions. You're humiliating him. I'm not responsible for what other people say, I replied. If Ethan is embarrassed, maybe he should look at why his wife needed to seek companionship elsewhere. Companionship? Ruth reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Is that what you called checking into the Riverside Inn last Friday night? My blood ran cold. Ruth unfolded what was clearly a hotel receipt and placed it in the center of the table. How did you get that? I whispered. I found it in your purse when I was looking for gum, Ethan said quietly. You left your purse on the counter when you picked up Mia yesterday. You went through my purse? I was looking for gum for Mia, he repeated. This fell out. Everyone at the table stared at the receipt. The Riverside Inn was an upscale hotel downtown, definitely not the kind of place someone went alone for space. This is a violation of my privacy, I said, my voice shaking. Your privacy? Ruth's voice was incredulous. You're married to my son. You have a 7-year-old daughter. Your privacy ended when you started sneaking around with other men. I wasn't sneaking around, I protested, but the words sounded weak even to me. Then what would you call it? Ruth demanded. What would you call checking into a hotel with a man who isn't your husband? My mother finally spoke up. Now wait just a minute. We don't know what happened at that hotel. Maybe Lysandra just needed a quiet place to think. With a man named Michael Thompson, according to the registration, Ruth said, pulling out another piece of paper. I called the hotel. The room erupted. Greta gasped, my father shook his head in disgust, and my mother started making excuses about how everyone makes mistakes. That's enough, Ethan said, standing up. Mia doesn't need to hear any more of this. You're right, I said, standing as well. This is exactly why I needed space in the first place. You're all ganging up on me, trying to make me feel guilty for finally being happy. Happy? Ruth's voice was shrill now. You think destroying your family makes you happy? I think being with someone who appreciates me makes me happy, I shot back. I think being with someone who makes me feel alive instead of dead inside makes me happy. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Ethan's face went completely white. Dead inside, he repeated quietly. Is that how you felt with me? I wanted to take the words back, but it was too late. Ethan, I didn't mean... Yes, you did, he said. You meant every word. He called for Mia, who came running back into the dining room. We're leaving, sweetheart, he told her gently. But we haven't had dessert yet, Mia protested. We'll have dessert at home. As they gathered their coats, I felt panic rising in my chest. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the victim here, the misunderstood wife seeking happiness. Ethan, wait, I called out. He turned back to me, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen before. I think you've said enough, Lysandra. After they left, the remaining family members sat in stunned silence. Well, my mother said finally, I think everyone just needs to calm down and... Mom, stop, I interrupted. Just stop. I felt cornered, attacked, misunderstood. Everyone was acting like I was some kind of monster for wanting more out of life. You know what? I said, standing up again. Since everyone wants to know the truth, here it is. Yes, I've been seeing Michael. Yes, we went to a hotel. And yes, I'm happier than I've been in years. Greta stared at me in shock. Lysandra. And there's something else you all should know, I continued, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went white, my father's jaw dropped, and Greta looked like she'd been slapped. Pregnant? My mother whispered. I nodded, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. I found out yesterday. Is it? Greta started to ask, then stopped. I don't know, I admitted. The timing is complicated. The truth was, I knew exactly whose baby it was. Ethan and I hadn't been intimate in over 2 months, and the hotel receipt Ruth had found was from 3 weeks ago. But I couldn't bring myself to say that out loud, not yet. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, reaching for my hand. "This changes everything." "Does it?" I asked. "Does it really?" Because I'm still the same person who was unhappy in her marriage. I'm still the same person who deserves to be loved and appreciated. But even as I said the words, I could see the judgment in everyone's eyes. Even my mother, who had been defending me, looked uncertain now. I left shortly after, driving back to Greta's in a daze. The confrontation had gone horribly wrong, but maybe it was better this way. Maybe it was time to stop pretending and face the reality of my situation. I was married to a man I no longer loved, pregnant with another man's baby, and about to become the subject of every gossip conversation in town. But I was also free, maybe for the first time in years, and that had to count for something. As I pulled into Greta's driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How did dinner go?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "We need to talk." Monday morning at Ethan's school was brutal. Word had spread quickly about our family dinner disaster, and by the time he arrived for his first period English class, half the faculty was looking at him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "Hey man," said David, another teacher, cornering Ethan by his locker. "I heard about yesterday. You doing okay?" Ethan nodded curtly. "I'm fine. Look, if you need someone to talk to, or if you want to grab a beer after work..." "Thanks, but I'm good." What David didn't know was that Ethan had spent most of Sunday night and early Monday morning making phone calls, not to friends or family members, but to lawyers. At lunch, he drove to the office of Patricia Wells, a divorce attorney who'd been recommended by his principal. The office was sterile and professional, exactly what he needed. "Mr. Vane," Patricia said, reviewing the notes she'd taken during their phone conversation, "you mentioned that your wife is currently pregnant, and you suspect the child isn't yours." "We haven't been intimate in over 2 months," Ethan said quietly, "and I have evidence of her affair." He pulled out a folder he'd been assembling since finding the hotel receipt. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages he'd recovered from their shared phone plan, copies of credit card statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels, and a timeline he'd created documenting Lysandra's activities. Patricia reviewed the materials carefully. "This is quite thorough. You've been documenting everything." "I'm a teacher," Ethan said. "Documentation is what I do." "Good. In cases like this, evidence is crucial. Now, you mentioned you have a 7-year-old daughter. Mia, she's the most important thing in my life. And your wife is currently living with her sister." "Yes, she claims she needed space to heal, but as you can see from the evidence, she was already involved with someone else before she even asked for the separation." Patricia nodded. "The timeline you've created here is very helpful. It shows a pattern of deception that predates the separation request." Meanwhile, across town, I was having my own crisis. After telling Michael about the pregnancy, he'd gone silent for 2 days. When he finally called, his voice was different, distant and careful. "Lysandra, I think we need to slow things down," he said. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this situation is more complicated than I realized. You're still married, you have a child, and now you're pregnant. I'm not sure I'm ready for all of that." I felt like I'd been slapped. "So you're abandoning me? Just like that?" "I'm not abandoning you. I just think you need to figure out your marriage situation before we can move forward." "I thought you cared about me." "I do care about you. That's why I think you need to be honest with your husband about everything. He deserves to know the truth." After he hung up, I sat in Greta's spare bedroom and cried. Everything was falling apart. My marriage was over, Michael was pulling away, and I was pregnant with a baby whose father didn't want the responsibility. That evening, Greta knocked on my door. We need to talk, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. About what? About what you're going to do. You can't hide out here forever, Lysandra. You have decisions to make. Like what? Like whether you're going to tell Ethan the truth about the baby, like whether you're going to file for divorce or try to work things out, like what you're going to tell Mia. I don't know, I said honestly. Everything is such a mess. It's a mess because you made it a mess, Greta said bluntly. I've been supportive, but I can't pretend anymore that this is all Ethan's fault. I stared at her in shock. You're taking his side now? I'm not taking sides. I'm being honest. You had an affair, Lysandra. You got pregnant by another man. You humiliated your husband in front of both families. These are the consequences of your choices. I thought you understood. I thought you supported me. I supported you taking time to figure out what you wanted. I didn't support you cheating on your husband and lying about it. The next day, I tried calling Michael again, but he didn't answer. I sent several text messages, but his responses were short and non-committal. At work, the atmosphere had changed too. My co-workers were polite but distant, and I caught them whispering when they thought I wasn't looking. Is everything okay? I asked Jennifer during a break. It's fine, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. People are talking about me, aren't they? Jennifer sighed. Look, Lysandra, I like you, but people are saying things about your situation, and it's making everyone uncomfortable. What kind of things? That you're married but dating other men. That you're pregnant and don't know who the father is. Whether that's true or not, it's affecting the office environment. I felt humiliated all over again. Even at work, where I'd always been respected, people were judging me. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother. Sweetheart, I think you should come home and talk to Ethan, she said. Why? Because Ruth called me this morning. She said Ethan has been meeting with lawyers. My blood ran cold. Lawyers? Divorce lawyers, honey. I think he's planning to file papers. But we're just separated. We never talked about divorce. Lysandra, you told us you're pregnant with another man's baby. What did you think was going to happen? That evening, I tried calling Ethan directly. He answered on the fourth ring. What do you want, Lysandra? I heard you've been talking to lawyers. Yes. Don't you think we should try to work this out, for Mia's sake? Work what out exactly? You're pregnant with another man's child. You've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months. What exactly is there to work out? Ethan, I know I made mistakes, but... Mistakes? His voice was incredulous. You call having an affair and getting pregnant a mistake. I was unhappy. I felt neglected. I made some poor choices, but that doesn't mean our marriage has to be over. Our marriage was over the moment you checked into that hotel with Michael Thompson. The way he said Michael's name made it clear he knew everything. How do you know his name? I know a lot of things, Lysandra. I know about your text messages. I know about the restaurants and the hotels. I know about the lies you told Mia about working late when you were really with him. I felt sick. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting your affair. There's a difference. Ethan, please, can't we at least try counseling? For Mia? Mia deserves better than parents who lie to each other. She deserves honesty and stability. I'm going to make sure she gets that. The line went dead. I sat in Greta's spare room, staring at my phone, realizing for the first time that I might lose everything. Not just my marriage, but my daughter too. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from an unknown number. Please be available at your current address tomorrow at 6 p.m. There are some documents you need to receive. I showed the message to Greta, who went pale. I think Ethan's about to serve you with divorce papers, she said. Can he do that? If he has grounds, yes. And Lysandra, based on everything that's happened, he definitely has grounds. I spent the rest of the day in a panic, calling lawyers and trying to figure out what my options were. But every attorney I spoke to told me the same thing. Given the evidence of my affair and the pregnancy, I was in a very weak position. As 6 p.m. approached the next day, I sat in Greta's living room, waiting. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, A professional-looking man in a suit stood there, with a manila envelope. "Are you Lysandra Vane?" "Yes. You've been served." He handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway with my entire future in my hands. I stared at the manila envelope for a full minute before opening it. My hands shook as I pulled out the legal documents inside. The first page was headed Petition for Dissolution of Marriage, and seeing it in black and white made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. Greta appeared behind me. "What does it say?" I scanned the pages, my heart sinking with each line. Ethan wasn't just filing for divorce. He was requesting full custody of Mia, citing my adultery and abandonment of family responsibilities. There were pages of evidence attached, screenshots of text messages, credit card statements, even witness statements from his colleagues who had seen me with Michael. "He's trying to take Mia away from me," I whispered. "Let me see," Greta said, taking the papers. After reading for a few minutes, she looked up at me with a grim expression. "Lysandra, this is serious. He's documented everything." "But I'm her mother. Courts don't just take children away from their mothers." "They do when the mother abandons the family home to have an affair and gets pregnant by another man," Greta said bluntly. "You need a lawyer. A good one." The next morning, I called every family law attorney in the phone book. Most were booked for weeks, but I finally found one who could see me that afternoon. Margaret Chen was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but a no-nonsense attitude. "Mrs. Vane," she said after reviewing the papers, "I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a strong position to be in. But surely I have some rights. Mia is my daughter." "Of course you have rights, but your husband has built a very compelling case. The timeline he's created shows that you were involved with Mr. Thompson before you even asked for separation. That undermines your claim that you needed space to work on the marriage." I felt tears starting to form. "So what can we do?" "We can fight for shared custody and a fair division of assets. But Mrs. Vane, I have to ask, is there any chance the baby you're carrying is your husband's?" "No," I admitted. "The timing doesn't work." Margaret nodded grimly. "That's going to be a problem. The court will see this as evidence of ongoing adultery and poor judgment." Over the next few weeks, I tried everything I could think of to salvage the situation. I called Ethan repeatedly, but he refused to speak to me directly, referring all communication to his attorney. I wrote him letters apologizing for my mistakes and begging him to reconsider, but got no response. Michael vanished the moment reality got heavy, and all that was left was Mia, confused, hurting, asking why sorry couldn't bring me home. In court, Ethan's lawyer laid out the story like a chart: distance, lies, affair, pregnancy, and a reconciliation attempt only after getting caught. I tried to explain loneliness and neglect, but the judge cut through it and framed it as abandonment and priorities, then granted Ethan primary custody, leaving me supervised visits and a life stripped down to consequences. Outside, Ethan didn't scream or gloat. He did something worse. He named it plainly. Not mistakes, choices, fantasy over family, excitement over stability. And trust, once broken, wasn't something forgiveness could magically glue back together. 6 months later, I had James, alone. Mia kept coming, but she came like a guest, polite, distant, counting minutes until she could return to the home that felt safe. Ethan moved on with someone steady, and Mia attached to that steadiness because kids do what they must to survive change. Friends faded. Support turned quiet. The journey stopped sounding poetic once it had a cost. And in the small apartment, feeding one child while the other emotionally packed her bags every visit, I finally saw the truth without excuses. I didn't lose a fairy tale. I traded something real for something thrilling, and the thrill left first. The ending wasn't redemption. It was clarity. I got the freedom I demanded, and learned too late that freedom without love, trust, and daily presence feels a lot like emptiness.